Hello there, ladies, gentlemen, and all variations thereupon. As you can see, I've sort of half moved. I'm actually in my parents' house now rather than the property I've brought, because that one's not ready yet. So it's going to be quite difficult for me to film in the next few weeks. Since as I'm at my parents' house, I thought today we'll do something a little bit different and we'll look at some of my treasures. And I don't mean things from my childhood that I love, I mean my actual treasures from my treasure chest. Before I show you what's inside, I should point out a couple of things. Firstly, these are historical artifacts, but they're legitimately obtained. A lot of these are Roman in origin. The Roman period was very wealthy and had a lot of artifacts which still remain today. So what will often happen today is somebody will go out with a metal detector, discover a hoard of Roman coins or some Roman artifacts of some kind. They'll go to the British Museum. The British Museum will catalogue them, make sure everything's in order, take any particularly valuable rare finds, compensate the person who found it, obviously, and then return the coins that aren't particularly valuable because there's just too many of them. We have an abundance of Roman artifacts, and then when it goes back to that private collector, that person who found it, they get then sold onto the private market, and you can obtain a lot of Roman artifacts very legitimately, which is what I have here, largely. There are some things which aren't Roman, and I think, shall I go in chronological order or reverse chronological order? Let's go from my most recent artifacts to the oldest first. So, most recent artifacts, World War II. Now this doesn't actually fit in a box, but an air raid warden helmet. This is one of the helmets that an air raid warden would have worn when the air raids were coming over during the Battle of Britain, and would have like guided people down to the bomb shelters and things, made sure that people weren't looting, that sort of thing. And it's just a artifact from fairly recent history, as it's still in living memory. And yeah, as you can see, this has taken a bit of a bump onto the top side where it's been dented in. The inside of the material is, I think, leather and rubber on the inside, and there's a canvas strap that goes around. It's just a piece of steel that looks like it's been just pressed into shape. Air raid warden helmet, fairly recent piece of history, and that's the most recent one I've got. Slightly before World War II, this book. Now, I'm not sure how clearly you're going to be able to read this. This is the state that the book came to me in, and it's slightly deteriorated. But this is the King Emperor's Jubilee book from 1910 to 1935. So this is a 1935 one. Just before World War II, and my granddad, who was a teenager at the time, so my granddad thought he would buy this as a souvenir for the occasion, as you always do when you have the royal weddings or jubilees or something. They always sell tat, and my granddad thought this would be a great investment, be worth a fortune in future. I don't think it's worth that much, and he didn't take that good a care of it, obviously, because it's starting to peer away. I don't want to rebind it. I want to try and keep it in its original state as long as I can, so I'm trying to look after it. And I'm not going to wear gloves, because if you wear gloves you're more likely to tear things. But it's a good little view into British history. So first page, we've got a picture of the King Emperor himself, and as far as artifacts go, this is a fairly good one, in the sense it gives a view of British life as it was just before World War II, in that sort of between the two wars period.
So this book shows crucially how the royal family wanted themselves to be seen at the time. So it's not an entirely honest historical record, it's more of a historical record that we want people to see. So it shows the royal family in the best possible light. Things like playing with children. There are, however, a lot of references to particular historical events, such as even before World War I, when the women's suffrage movement was becoming very radical, there were many clashes with police, and one very famous historical event is recorded where Emily Davidson threw herself in front of the king's horse at the races and actually died. She committed suicide for the cause of advancing the awareness, at least, of women's suffrage and winning women the right to vote. And this really had a strong impact on British life and the decision to finally give women the right to vote, although it wouldn't come for many years afterwards. One of the things that this book shows is not just Britain, but the empire as a whole, so places like Burma and India, where you get to see things as the royal family would have wanted the empire to be seen. So there will be nothing of the actual exploitation of the conquered peoples, but there will be lots of images of the splendour of the empire and tiger hunts and people riding elephants and such like. There is also some footage of the attacks that happened in Britain during World War I. These are air raids, and it's not a World War II air raid because this book was published before World War II. It shows some of the devastation that was caused. There's also images in here of the celebrations after the victory. So after Armistice Day, everyone's celebrating. And one of my favourite things towards the end of the book is there's actually a familiar face in here. As you see, this very young queen. This is Queen Elizabeth and her sister playing some sort of tug of war. So, yeah. Old Queenie.
Right, so recent history done. Now we're going back quite a way to a more Roman period, and these are the artefacts that are in abundance. They're not particularly valuable artefacts, but I like them because they are old and I love the Roman period. Let's start reverse chronological order, so the most recent first. We have these coins. I have several of these that are of, down on the back, these are of Julian the Apostate. Now Julian was one of the emperors of the late Roman Empire, and he ruled over what was a Christian empire. It's some half a century after Constantine the Great had officially established Christianity as the religion of the empire. So he was ruling well into a Christian period, but not entirely Christian, and he was the last pagan emperor. All the emperors before him had been Christian, and he was raised Christian, but then he decided Christianity is not for him. Basically his concept was there was another god who all the other gods were reflections of. This god was superior to them all, and it was Sol Invictus, I believe he was. And he wanted the empire to go back to a pagan world where Sol Invictus was the supreme deity and all of the gods were a reflection of that. Sol Invictus being the unconquerable sun, solar sun disk in the sky was the supreme deity. His perception throughout history is sort of ebbed and flowed a bit. Originally, through most of history, he's been seen as a bit of a bad guy because he was the pagan emperor, the apostate. In more recent years, people have sort of re-evaluated and said he wasn't really that bad an emperor. He was probably misguided in thinking he could turn it back to being a pagan empire. He probably wasn't that bad an emperor, especially when you consider the other Roman emperors of the late Roman Empire. Now we've got two here which are contemporaries. The one that died first and the one that ended up losing out is Licinius I, and this is one of the emperors from the Tetrarchy. After the crisis of the 3rd century, the empire was split up into 4 sections, and each was ruled by its own emperor. This was known as the Tetrarchy, and Licinius was one of these emperors. And he had a contemporary which was far more famous, I've already mentioned, which is Constantine the Great, the first Christian emperor. These two coins are almost identical, and it took me ages to work out exactly which one was which this morning because I didn't label these things properly. So one of these is Licinius, who was a pagan emperor. Constantine largely was a pagan emperor as well. He only adopted Christianity at the end of his life, and they ruled two separate halves of the empire. Constantine in the west, Licinius in the east, and they had a bit of a back and forth. They were constantly fighting between themselves in separate battles. One time Constantine managed to get one decisive victory and ended Licinius once and for all, taking control of the whole empire and becoming the sole emperor. What Constantine's thing was, after he conquered the empire, made it one empire, one emperor and one god. So everything was united, and as we all know, the Roman Empire went perfectly swimmingly after that. But that's not the only Constantine coin I have. This is another Constantine coin. See Emperor Constantine there, and you can see on the back is that this is a commemorative coin. I believe it is. I'm not an expert on coins, I'm talking like I know what I'm talking about, but I believe this is one of the commemorative coins that he had struck after he founded a new Rome. The new Rome being Constantinople, the city that would take his name. And basically the reason he did that is because there was too much of a distance really between the east, where a lot of the hostile actions were being fought with the Parthians, and Rome itself. There was too long a line of communication, and Rome itself was not particularly defensible. It hadn't been sacked or invaded at that point, but it was pretty clear that Rome wasn't really fit for service. But Constantinople, or Byzantium as it was at the time, was a perfectly defensible area. You got the sea on 3 sides, you could build a big wall on the other, and you're perfectly safe. And it's a city that lasted unsacked for a very long time. I do have one other coin, but I don't know who this is or where it's from, and I can't find the certificate that came with it. I'm not certain who this is. You can see he's got a sunburst on the top of his head, which indicates that it was probably something to do with a divinity. Like that's something they do after Roman emperors died normally. And I think it says Divis on the side, which would mean that he was the divine. And it has on the back some sort of I can't say if it's a gate or an altar, but it's rather worn. I'm not certain what it is. If you know what this coin is, please do let me know, because it's probably one that I've been given as a gift and I have no idea who it is. But what is interesting in this one, you can see it has some straight edges on it, which means it's a coin that's been clipped. So someone's taken chunks out of the coin in order to use as an even smaller denomination of currency. So I have no idea who that is. Again, if you know, just let me know in the comments. So I'd be interested to find out. One of the artifacts that I've got from the Roman Empire, which is again from the reign of Constantine. It's not that I have a particular like of the time period of it, Constantine and the Tetrarchy. It's just that this was a turbulent time in Rome's history, so a lot of the artifacts from that time got buried. So you have an abundance of them and they're fairly cheap. So this one was a gift, and it's not a coin, but it's from the same period, and that is this ring. It's a ring that's almost broke and it's been crushed a little bit. So even though it was designed for a bigger finger, it only just fits on my little pinky finger. And it's largely made out of iron by the feel of it. So I don't think this is a particularly high status ring. But if you look at the top, there was something that was set into there which has gone missing. So that was probably some sort of, it's either a precious stone, like something like a garnet or something that just looked fancy. Maybe a bit of jet or something like that. It's a very simple ring, and one of the things that I want to do with this ring is make a replica of it. So in a future video I'm going to try and make a replica of this ring that I could wear on a daily basis, because I really like this, but it looks like it's about to fall apart, so I'm not going to be wearing it around the house. Now, seeing all this, if you do want any artifacts for yourself, a Roman coin or a bit of ring or brick or something, I recommend, rather than just looking on eBay, that you look for legitimate sellers, because whilst there are an abundance of Roman artifacts, there are some unscrupulous people who will either try and sell fake ones or just sort of rob a site and just try and sell it on the market without going through a museum first. So try and find someone, a legitimate seller, that you can guarantee that these things have gone to a museum first and archaeologists have done their work for them before they've come onto the market. But like I say, Roman artifacts everywhere. You can get them fairly easily and relatively cheaply for what they are. So that's all we've got for today. Hopefully soon I'll be in my own flat and we'll be back to making things, because once I get my own place, obviously I'm going to want to do a lot of DIY around the place, just to set it up, set up my recording studio, set up green screens and things, decorate. I've got a plan to turn my living room into Flower Fruit Mountain, so plenty to do, and all that's going to be coming up. So if you're interested in DIY stuff, be sure to subscribe, and if you want to see me make that Roman ring, be sure to stay tuned as well. And I'll see you in a future video, hopefully soon. Not certain if I'll get one up next week, but hopefully. Ciao for now.